Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with Dr. Tommy Pinkston, 36, from North Carolina. We had a lot of fun talking about F3, talking about our practices, talking about Vision Source, and what all of those things mean to us. I really enjoyed our conversation. It's always fun to get to know Tommy better, and I hope to have some beatdowns with him in the future. As always, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. I want to talk about the MyDay multifocal for a sec. We had the opportunity to do a preclinical trial with this lens this last summer, and there were a couple things that I thought were really helpful. The first one is that it is different than a lot of the multifocals that we've used before in our practices, where patients, especially early emerging presbyopes, really managed it didn't cause a lot of additional distance blur for them. And the other thing that was really helpful was, because we've never been involved in a clinical trial before, was to understand the sort of questions that we might ask our patients. And we ask our patients a lot of questions about their satisfaction with a contact lens, but what we weren't doing was actually having them score that themselves. So one of the parts of this that was really interesting to me was asking patients on a scale of 1 to 10 how they would score their vision, how they would score their comfort in their current lenses, and then how they would do the same on their new lenses. And it showed me a lot of times where patients would say they were happy, might rate their vision as a 6 or a 7. And then it also reframed their thinking about their current satisfaction in their lenses and allowed me to open up the door to offering other solutions. So if you haven't tried something like that in your clinical practice, I would encourage you to. And I would also encourage you to try the MyDay multifocal for your patients. What do you think about your macular degeneration supplements for patients in category 1 through category 4? Do you feel like you have a really good way to distinguish between what type of supplement you're using and why you're using it? I'd encourage you to check out the evidence behind MacuHealth. We've used it in our practice for a number of years now, and we have a real great solution for patients in category 3 and 4, as well as supplements for patients who don't need the full AREDS formulation. We've been really impressed in our practice by the way it performs and also by the patient acceptance of those supplements. And MacuHealth has also been a great partner in our practice to help us with resources and tools to help us describe and define why their supplements are more bioavailable than some of the things that patients can find at a supermarket or a drugstore. And the most important thing for me about having a supplement in our practice for patients to have access to is I can know whether or not they're getting exactly what I'm prescribing. So that seems to be really helpful for my patients because they're not scouring through the aisles trying to pick up something and having that 10-minute evaluation of what type of supplement they need. So if you haven't started using MacuHealth in your practice yet, you can find all their information in the show notes. And they definitely have something that is worth your patient's time and worth your patient's vision. So thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to connect. I know I've watched you do coding stuff for a little bit, and then I realized you're an F3 guy, and that's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's
How long
awesome.
have you been in?
It sounds like we're talking about prison, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We've started our F3 chapter about almost 4 years ago. We have a small town of about 10,000 people in Western North Carolina, and so we started. A buddy and I he came up to me, I think, and he's like, "Hey, we should start this group in Waynesville," and I was like, "All right, let's do it," And so we hadn't even been to a workout. Like we read about it, we went to church together, him and I was like, this sounds like something that we would right up our alley. And we had kind of run and just done some little workouts here and there, but nothing legitimately like F3. And then we went to Asheville, which is about a 40-minute drive, and became official F3 guys. And then they're like, "All right, you guys going to do this?" And so how they just kind of, if you show leadership capability, you're going to be thrust into that whether you like it or not. And so we just jumped into it and we started hitting the ground running. And then they helped us really. That were helpful in terms of just teaching us how to get that launched. And we just found a good close-knit group of core guys. And that was about 4 years ago, so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I'm going to read you something. And I'm going to change some of the words because I think the audience who aren't familiar with F3 parlance will understand a little bit better. But I want to get your reaction. A new guy worked out one morning. He puked and otherwise, in his mind, and only in his mind, disgraced himself. At the end of the workout, he got his F3 name in the circle of trust and was dragging his butt back to the car. And he stumbled accidentally into the leader for that day, who was obviously admiring his pecs in the window of his Lexus. The new guy must have felt a little weird because he went ahead and blurted out what was on his mind. He apologized for, quote, slowing the group down. I don't know how many times I've read this, and I can't get through it without doing what I'm doing now. The leader laughed and replied, he hadn't slowed anything down. Quote, anyway, the Q told the FNG, or the new guy. Quote, brother, you're the reason we're here in the first place. You are why we're here. And, I mean, I thought about that for, years. And I don't know why I'm so moved by it, because it really, like, could I go a long life without, the men that surround me? Yeah, I could. But I think one of the things that moves me about it is that I think there's so many other people that are going through life. Just sad clowns, right?
It's a powerful group, and I think for men, no matter where you're at in life, whether you're a 15-year-old kid or you're 80 years old, there is something just uniquely primal about needing to have male leadership and invigoration. It's just part of, I think, who we are. And I think that naturally, we get in business or you get in professional life, you want to build these walls. Like, I have no imperfections. I'm a strong man. And there's this conflation of weakness not being manly in a sense, right? And so then you go to F3 and you think like, okay, I'm a professional. I may have my business or whatever I'm doing professionally, and I've got my family. But then the workout, for lack of a better term, it's going to kick your ass. The first time you're out there, there's no way around it. You're going to get your butt kicked. And you have just got to be ready to be humble. And I think when you're that vulnerable with that many open men, without even knowing, like, you got usually one or two guys, three if you're really already part of it, and then you're just you have to be vulnerable. And I think it's very different than most things that we're a part of professionally or personally, that hey, we're happy you're here, and we're happy you suffered, and we're better because you suffered, right? And we're better because of it. It's not about winning or losing. It's about just being vulnerable. And I think that's the powerful thing about any really powerful group, but particularly with F3. It's just you show up and it's powerful because of the fact that we're all there, and it's about the struggle. It's not about the results, right? It's not about that I can do 100 push-ups quicker than you can, or vice versa, or who can run faster. Like that is for other times, in other avenues. This is more like, hey, we're going to struggle together, and that struggle is going to make us stronger as a group and stronger as individuals. And I think it's really hard to know what that's like until you've been a part of that. And I think guys who've done collegiate sports or been a part of the military, they kind of understand that a little bit, because it's not about whether our team won the championship. I mean, it is, but it's really not. You have those collective relationships throughout your life, and F3, I think, just it's like that on steroids. I mean, it's hard to describe.
Yeah, it is. I think my reflection and seeing that again, I was in really good shape when I started doing F3. I just wanted a different workout, and I didn't realize the other aspects of it. But you see, that story, I see guys like this all the time, new guys that come out and they're apologetic for being the last in line. And you see just, the best in shape of all the guys kind of coming back, and they don't have to, they're not, I was reflecting on this this morning in a pre-run with some of my buddies, and they're not dragging you along. Come on, man, you could do this. Because that would be off-putting right away if you didn't know the guy. Mm-hmm. We had an event this weekend that I wasn't aware was a competition at first, but it was. On Friday, it was a Saturday event. It was a fundraiser. And there were about 20 groups of about 4 to 6 people in every group. And one of my... So we wound up winning. But I should send you the video. They put it on Twitter. But The last thing we ended with after 6 miles of running and probably over 1,000 different reps doing other things, we ended with 50 burpees and 50-yard duck walk. And I promise you, if somebody wasn't there in this case because I knew them and trusted them, right, and I have been through the hard parts before, if I hadn't been through that, if they would have just gotten after me when I first got out and I didn't have a trust, I didn't trust them and they were like, come on, let's go. Like I would have been like, I don't care about you guys. But the fact that we have done that for years, almost 2 years, and they were kind of getting after me. I had already been through difficult things. They knew what I needed when I needed it. And and so I think the point is that knowing that you've been around for a long time and you see the guy that's 100 pounds overweight and he's there for the first time and he's just trying to keep up, but not saying anything to him when he doesn't need something said. He knows he's out of shape. All he needs you to do is be there for a while, and then he needs you to kick him in the butt when he needs it. Once you've built that relationship.
Right. It's you don't want to come across patronizing. It's very important, because it's like, well, yeah, I'm here because I'm trying to get better. So just hang with me for a minute, But I mean, I think that the physical aspect is only one part of it. I think most guys really come back for, because I've talked to some guys where you join F3 and your fitness levels go up, and then as your fitness level go up, you're part of this group, and then not that it stagnates, but you could get a better workout elsewhere. I mean, I don't mean that, man. I just mean like if you really want to go and
you could do CrossFit.
You could do I don't mean that. That's not a negative thing against F3. That is what keeps you coming back. Is not that it's the hardest workout that you could possibly do. It is for some guys, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that mean. I think for me and for a lot of guys, as you keep coming back, you come back because it's a challenging workout, and you can make that as challenging as you want. But I think the mental aspect for me, I'd just a little bit about me. So we started F3 about 4 years ago, and I'd lost my father almost 7 years ago. So I lost my father to suicide unexpectedly. He was in his mid-50s, and so that whole mental aspect of men's health for me, and I don't tell, this is probably the first time I've publicly even said that. And the reason I say that is because we don't know each other very well, but you're an F3 guy and we come from similar backgrounds. But that is something I think that men don't really realize because it's underneath the surface, right? You have successes that you try to, show off on social media or whatever it is, and then there's this part of vulnerability that is part of that group that, when you have a really tough time, that you need a buddy to just, hey, I just need somebody to just listen to my issue just for a minute, just be vulnerable. That's the first guys you're going to go to, right? I mean, that's a guy, we may be doing middle push-ups, and I'd be like, hey man, I'm struggling, right? It might be coding help, it could be whatever, but it's that availability to have that vulnerability because you've suffered physically with these guys, and that you feel like there's a trust built where you might have a professional colleague that you trust very good, but you're not going to have that vulnerable conversation about stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part is that especially in a profession that's small and also great, I think it's worth having a conversation about Vision Source within this too. I mean, I'm just bringing this in because I think there's a professional aspect to that, right? Like everybody thinks about Vision Source as like a buying group, right? That's the first thing that comes to their mind. But it actually is way deeper because you're breaking down, you're starting to trust each other's opinions about what they're doing, what you're doing clinically, what you're doing in business. And then pretty soon you're trusting each other's judgments and encouragement because they have your best interest at heart, as opposed to even our, in a lot of ways, like our state associations can fulfill a lot of things, like especially politically, that nobody else can do. From an educational standpoint, there's things they can do that nobody else can do. But there still is, once you get to the heart of it, there's still this little bit of like, this guy might still think he's my competitor. And he's right down the road. I don't think he's my competitor, but he might think he is. And so when I ask him something or he comes to me with a question, the question is like, are you going to be as sharing as I'm going to be? Right? There's this little, I think in the back of a lot of our heads. And I think Vision Source allows us to remove that. This isn't a Vision Source conversation, but it allows us professionally to remove that. And F3 does the same thing. And so it breaks down those barriers, as you say, and gets us away from having friends who are professional friends, but we can't be vulnerable around them, right? So I probably went too far on that reading that I went on, but I guess
no, you're fine, man. I think it's helpful. I mean, like, right? I'm very much the believer that we only grow when you're vulnerable or in times of discomfort, right? Whether that's physical discomfort, right? Like if I just do everything that's comfortable, right? Professionally, personally, it's going to be stagnant, right? It's going to be stagnation. And so I think that's important, just even from a professional standpoint, right? Like I can only grow where I'm vulnerable and I have problems, right? If I have all the things figured out, then I don't need any help. And that's just very naive of me to think about from a personal and professional standpoint. So I think there's a lot of parallels between both groups, right? I mean, not only the vulnerability, but trying to engage leaders, right? You want to kind of help groom the future leaders of your profession, and just like you want to help groom the future leaders of F3 or whatever within those circles, right? Even you can see, I love it when the guys come and you say, "Hey man, it's your time to queue," and you're like, "Nah, I'm not ready." I'm like, "Well, you're never going to be ready, so you just need and you kind of have to push them a little bit." And some are really eager, and so it's interesting to see those people kind of go through the ranks and kind of figure out like, "Hey, I think I'm ready now." I'm like, "Man, you were ready 6 months ago. Like, it's all right. You're going to mess it up. It's going to be awful. No, people are going to be complaining about it. Just keep going. Just tell them to do it. Hush and keep moving." And so I love seeing that type of thing and getting people involved in those organizations and seeing them be successful. I think for me, that's huge. Like just in optometry, in F3, it's cool seeing.
I wish I was better at that. I think there's some really good guys that are great at identifying leadership capabilities in others. I think that's probably not a great thing that I do. Have you gotten better at that, or are you just naturally good at it?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I've tried to get better at that over time. I really enjoy building things, I guess, and not necessarily like physical things. I think I really enjoy building groups. And so like from a professional standpoint, I love the practice management of like building a team. Like, how do we get this team to work together? Very, very much like F3. Okay, how do I get all these people to work together in the same direction? We're going to have friction. Like there's going to be a dissent in ideas potentially, but how do we not turn that into a disagreeable environment? And then how do I ultimately turn those dissent or those disagreements to move in the right direction, right? Just like if I say, "Hey, we're going to do 100 burpees," right? Like no one's going to love that idea. Nobody, right? Even me. But like maybe we split it up. Maybe we break it up into 10. Like how are we going to do that to accomplish the goal? So at the end of the day, we're kind of all better for it. And so I whether I'm good at it or not, I enjoy it, and so I think kind of you end up getting better at what you enjoy, and so it's something for me that I find cool, like just to see whether it's to see our technician step up or to see an optician step up. I'm like, this is awesome. Like I'm so proud of you. Like that to me, that's better than I love seeing the financials, obviously, but that to me seems more fulfilling at the end of the day.
You recently just refinished or built an entirely new office. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've got a partner. We finished an office in October. So we bought a building about 2 weeks before COVID hit, and then we were on cloud 9, and then COVID hit, and then that was wild. And so we hung on to it for about a year to make it short and didn't do much with it, and then redid a building. Our practice was in a small downtown area for 60 plus years. And then we were in about a 2,000 square foot facility, and now we're close to 5,000 square feet, 8 exam lanes, and we've got an associate. So we're just kind of settling in. We've been in that building, 8 months now? Mm-hmm. And so that was quite a big undertaking. But kind of what we're doing now is restructuring. Like, okay, how do I get all these team members on the same page? How are we going to communicate? Where's our communication structure? Like, how do we do things again? Because it's not opening up a new office, but going that big very quickly, the leadership and the communication can make or break, from an office standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, we're going through similar transition periods right now. So we've got my dad who is going to stop clinical care on July 1st. He's been 2 days a week for the last, a while. And then
I lost you.
One of the docs had twins. Dr. Barrett had twins about 4 months ago now, not quite 4 months ago, and she's coming back in June. And then we hired a new doctor, and so we will have kind of the same thing, but in the same physical plant that we've always been in. But, once my dad decided to retire and I bought him out, then I don't think that there was just some changes that I wanted to make. And it wasn't that I wanted to kind of completely redo stuff, but it is that, like, how many people now we're going to have, instead of having 2 doctor equivalent days, I wanted to hire a new associate and not have to be like, well, you're just going to get 2 days and go fill in for someplace else for 3 days. And I expect that you're going to be in our practice at some point full time. I said, look, we're just going to hire you on. You're going to learn. It'll work itself out. And I do believe that. But that means that, like, how do we have the infrastructure on a couple days a week to handle 3 doctors when we've only handled 2? And how do we, before, and do we add more people to the team, which costs more money, and how do you manipulate the footprint? But it's really interesting. Like, we're in the process right now of looking at land and building a building and those sorts of things. But it's interesting to see what you can do with the existing space you have. And we don't have a small place. We have enough space, but just figuring out, okay, well, where's going to be the cogs in the wheel and how do we overcome that is fun.
Oh, it's fun. I and like I said, just figuring out how to get people to communicate. Like, right? I mean, like, how do you get different people's goals, right? Because I kind of look at it as we've got sort of 4 separate individual smaller teams, right? I've got my front desk, which we call it patient intake or patient care. I've got technicians, I've got opticians, and I've got insurance, right? Plus I've got a whole doctor. So really I got 5. Like, and those all have separate goals, and sometimes those goals can conflict. And then if I give them different goals based on the landscape or the layout or schedule, then it can easily create, because if I'm giving mixed signals and mixed leadership goals, then I can easily be a hindrance to that communication. So it can be time consuming, but it can also be fun when you get the team to click on all cylinders.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
This is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
It's so fun. I really enjoy that part of it.
Do you think
on the flip side, it can be a headache?
Yeah,
right?
no, it can, because if they're firing on the wrong cylinders,
Oh, whew.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just as a man, I mean, you can feel when you're off, right? When things are just like, golly, this is just. You walk away from clinic that day, or just walk away from your day altogether. You reflect at the end of the day. What was my relationships like today? Was I in this for myself, or was I trying to better somebody else's life today in all my encounters? And you can feel like maybe you can't identify it, but it becomes very apparent when you can become aware of those things. And so I can completely feel when our office isn't clicking. I don't know if everybody else can, but it's not that we're not, we're producing well. The things are getting done, but there's just something amiss. I can feel that. Have you ever been able to put your finger on that?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it comes down to, like, were we purposeful of what we did today? Right. So it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, it was great. Like, we could have sold a lot of glasses or seen a lot of patients or had a lot of receipts. That can be great, but that's not necessarily an indicator for was the day purposeful. And like you said, some days if I gauge that, it'd be interesting to sit down and like make tallies. Like, today I felt purposeful in what we do, right? But like, have conversations and about with your staff, or just like with F3 or with Vision Source, like, did today you meet your goal of being purposeful and impact people's life, regardless of the finances, regardless of the numbers, which is again all important, but did you do that? And some days you can say you truthfully did that, and some days, like, I just mailed it in today. Like, I didn't do anything wrong, but I just wasn't there. And that's hard to do, but your staff feeds off that, right? Like, if I'm short and I'm not necessarily in the best mood, and I'm going to be a jerk, but if I'm not in the best mood, they're going to feel that, right? And they're going to go home and feel just as frustrated as I am, or they might get frustrated at me, and then we might have this other bigger issue. And so I think it's very important, just long term, to think like, okay, today, what is my overall goal with this whole thing, right? Yes, it's seeing patients, but what's the purpose? Like, what am I actually doing here? And I think the same thing with, I think really that's why we talk about these groups. Like, we talk about Vision Source, we're talking about F3, like we're talking about optometry, but like, we're not necessarily doing it because of one specific action. Like, I'm not just refracting somebody. It's a larger vision of, okay, they're here for a purpose, and I'm going to impact their life, whether I like it or not. And so I need to be a positive trajectory as best I can in that. And so it's hard, though. I mean, some days, it's very hard,
Yeah, I think I think there's days where I'll come home and I'll even mention to my wife, Jamie, I'll say, like you said, we're not hurting anybody. We're doing a good job, right? You're doing a good job, but I just sit back and I just don't feel like I helped anybody today. Like, of course you did, but you didn't. It doesn't have to be like a miracle every day. But sometimes you have those days, and sometimes that's a me problem, I suppose. Where like you said, it's probably more about what was my purpose for the day. Is my purpose to just kind of get through the day because I know tomorrow is going to be Thursday and I get to do something. I'm kind of burnt out for the week, and now I'm going to do something different. Or was it because I had other stuff on my mind that about things that weren't important to that moment? And so you just try to have less of those days. But I think being aware of them, for me, has helped, because when I have those days, I can know, like, all right, something was amiss. I gotta get right. I wasn't where I want to be. Tomorrow's a different day. We could start over. You know what I mean? And I think I think you can get into problems when you don't have that perspective. Fortunately, I don't get into those problems, but I'm intentional about it.
And I think there's again, we keep going back to Vision Source and F3 because we're both members of that. But I think that, are you purposeful and are you fulfilling your own purpose, whatever that may be, will give you or not give you fulfillment, right? Like if you're just an eye doctor and you're just, and there's nothing wrong with that, and you're saying, listen, I'm just going to go from 8 to 5, and if that's my goal and that's my purpose, cool, you're going to feel fulfilled by that. But kind of like thinking back to, at the end of the day, I want to feel fulfilled with whatever I'm doing, right? And I think having those groups like Vision Source or F3 not only makes you be really responsible to yourself about what your purpose is, but also kind of check in with yourself on a regular basis, right? I got people that hold my feet to the fire, right? If we go to a Vision Source group, you're like, listen, man, you're not coding, right? Like, you're going to tell me, and I'm be like, you're right, I'm kind of messing up here. Like, right, or with F3, like, dude, like, if I know if you're mailing in on a workout, right, I'm going to be like, hey, man, like, I'm going to give you a hard time if I know that you're mailing it in, or we're going to have a conversation, or we might have a vulnerable conversation about, hey, I'm stressed at home or whatever. And I think all of that kind of plays into it with these groups, and kind of, there's a social aspect, I think, that we all want to be a part of something, and that also will kind of just keep us driving towards that purpose and ultimately being fulfilled. Because I think that's the issue, right? You get to the end of your career or your life, and you don't find that purpose, that fulfillment. I mean, you can find plenty of people in any profession that are just not feeling fulfilled with that, because there are other missing puzzle pieces that aren't maybe financially tangible, but they're huge in terms of feeling that fulfillment.
What do you think is the percentage, if you reflect on our profession, in your sense? I mean, we probably run around with the same types of guys, right? If your situation in your Vision Source group is similar to ours, this may not happen. But when you think about the profession in general, what do you think is the number of people that are just sort of in it to 8 to 5 it, and it's a job to them at this point? Any sense on that?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, and maybe that's because this may be bad, but maybe I try not to kind of I'm not in those circles as much, I don't feel like, and so I try not to maybe get involved with those circles, just because I have a tendency to be negative if I let my own thoughts and I can kind of get involved with that.
Me too.
And so I don't know. I mean, I would love to say it's low, but I honestly don't know. I feel like if I just spitball, I'm just completely being immature with my guess. But I think that's every profession. I think that's part of, unfortunately, life. I don't think that's just an optometry thing.
Do you think that's a new thing? Because I agree with you. I think it's probably I wouldn't have the answer either. I'm not trying to lead you down a path. I don't know. Sometimes the sense I think probably not. By and large, I think probably not. But I don't think it's very many people are like that. But I do wonder, like, in the culture, right? Have we come to a point where we're seeing more of that now than with where there's no kind of sense of cohesiveness, right? We're not all moving toward the same goal, or we're not all have the same, or even just a vested interest in others. Like I care about the success of your practice because I care about, I mean, we don't know each other that well, but because I care about you as an individual, right? And it doesn't take a lot of back and forth that way. And so have we gotten away from caring, is it easier to not care from a cultural standpoint?
Those are heavy questions, man. We're going deep here. I mean,
we can stop soon if you want.
No, you're fine, man. I feel like I'm in my first F3 workout. I feel so unprepared. Like, I know there's going to be workouts, but I have no idea what's going to happen. I think we are in a great profession. I think most people, I would agree with you, are happy and that don't just clock in and clock out. I mean, I think most optometrists are very caring, good-hearted people that really want to do the right thing and will go above and beyond for each and every patient. So I don't think it's even a large minority of people that are kind of unhappy. But I think you're right. I think culturally there's something to this, the way that, you know, if you think of just the internet and how social media and our phones have changed things, we're instantly connected to people, but we're also so far away from everybody from a community standpoint. Like, so a little bit about us, I practiced in Atlanta for about 4 years, and it's great, and it's a cool town, and it's awesome. And we had all these people around us, but we're not from there. But we had this very small circle of friends that we knew from college, right? And I'm in this huge city of millions of people, right? And then I moved to a small town of like 10,000 people, and I have immediately a much more connected community that are really, really, truly invested in my kids. Besides, like, in Atlanta, I was like a handful of people we went to college with. So, like, those are college buddies. It was great. But now I have these people that don't even know me, right? But we have this immediate connection. And I think to some degree, kind of what you're saying is, like, there is this disconnect. And I think that bleeds over to some of this fulfillment, right? Like, what's your village? Like, whether you have, I know you have kids too. I have kids too. Like, how do you build your village around yourself, right? Professionally and personally. And I think that does have a lot to do with your happiness, right? Because if I'm just going about this alone, the struggles are going to get a lot harder. Like, the struggles every day are going to get a lot harder than if I'm doing it kind of with a group, or at least somebody who can understand my struggles. But listen, I've been there. You know, I hear you. We're having the same issues. We can bounce ideas off each other. And so I think that can make it harder when you feel kind of isolated, you know? I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it does.
I think you're right. I think it's
easier. I think it's easier to be isolated now. I mean, look, you can click off this button in the next few minutes when we're all done, and you can forget about this conversation all day long. I suspect you won't, and I won't either. But it's like you said, it's easy to just kind of go to the next thing. I mean, I can look at my list of to-dos today, and I mean, I'm going to be a taskmaster. I hate it. Today is going to be a day that I'm just going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. I'm not going to be able to sit back and usually Thursdays are a day where I actually like to sit back and reflect a little bit and kind of think about, like you said, how's our team doing? How can we do things better? Is there an idea that we're not doing right now that we can integrate? And, you know, I've just got meeting after meeting after meeting, right? And it's not that I don't want to be at those meetings. It just means that if that was my day, 5 days a week, and that's all I did, or that was, I think that would be really, for me, it would be really hard. It'd be really hard. And I think it is, the old thing of, like, you can make excuses for a lot of stuff, right? Like, we've heard all of them, right? It's too early. It's too dark. It's too rainy. It's too cold. I'm not in good enough shape. Or, but those are issues that that anybody could say.
Yeah.
Same thing is, like, you know, do I want to integrate a new piece of technology into my practice, or do I want to integrate vision therapy in my practice, or scleral lenses, or whatever? Boy, that's going to be difficult. I don't know if I can do that. Am I the kind of guy that can do that? And you know, and then if you don't have a support system around you to reinforce those things, it's very difficult. I'll tell you, I think that's where people struggle.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's kind of, so I was talking to somebody else, and I kind of said this, like, you know, if you come to F3 and are you hurt, are you injured, right? And there's similar words, but they're very different. Like, are you truly injured? If so, that's stopping you. I get it, right? And that's a roadblock to doing this. Like, you need to stop. But you're just hurting. That's a little bit different, right? Like, and that's kind of the same thing professionally. Like, is this something that's truly going to injure my, like, professional success, or is there just going to be some discomfort, which I don't love and I really don't like it, but ultimately it's probably going to push me through? And I think that's hard. It's easy when you're doing something physical, like, okay, my leg's broken, I'm injured, I'm out. I know that, right? Versus like professionally, it's like, okay, well, I've got all these staff issues. I've got these monetary issues. I know I should do it, but these are all roadblocks. So I'm done. I'm out. That's it. And it's like, it's very easy to do that. And that's a much more harder to navigate situation, because there are things that, I mean, I know I should do with our practice. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do it right now because I'm not going to do it. Like, it's part of life.
What's your why? What's your why in practice? In practice, what's your identity?
So my personal one or our practice one?
Let's start with your practice.
We just went through this. We're using Traction. We went to, and so it's huge. We're in the middle of Traction and kind of overwhelmed right now with all we have going on, honestly, because we're trying to do all these things and do enough to make people uncomfortable, which we probably tend to do a little too much too aggressively as a leadership group, and so then the staff kind of pulls back. So we're in the midst of that. But we went through it, and our little tagline that we figured out is just be awesome. Like we're going to be essentially try to be the best we can be, and that looks different for every single patient encounter, right? So for a couple years, we've told our staff, like, I want to be the best practice in the state. I like, and I don't mean that in terms of financial. I don't mean the biggest or the best, but like, we are in this small town, and you need to be able to walk into our office and feel like you could walk into Charlotte or Raleigh or Atlanta or wherever, New York. I don't care. But in terms of what you're offered, in terms of how you're cared about, like, that is the feel that we're going for. And so after back and forth, we kind of just said, that's what it is. Like, just be awesome, right? And if that's handling a patient that's upset, be awesome at it. I don't know what that looks like, but figure it out, right? If that's going above and beyond and seeing our patient or whatever you're going to do, like, that is kind of exactly what we want our staff to do. And our staff is very good about, elderly patient walking in, they'll go get an umbrella and walk them in, and it's just like, that's amazing. Like, that's exactly what it is. It has no revenue generating amount, but that is going to completely differentiate, and that's kind of what we want to be about. And that's kind of hard sometimes because, both of us understand that there's a lot of financial impact that we have to watch, right? We have to make sure we're watching those numbers. And that's sometimes hard because you have these financial conversations with your staff, and you're like, hey, here's what we're doing. And it can sometimes get lost in translation because you're talking about all these definable metrics, but at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with it, but not necessarily what you're going for in terms of bringing back to, again, the purpose. Like, I have to do that to get to my purpose, but the purpose is we want to be awesome at how we approach patient care.
I love that. I think that I think is a little bit unusual. I've started asking this question when I'm talking. I'll, especially like if I'm doing a protocol, if I'm talking about, like right now it's dry eye, if it's myopia management, if it's I ask the question. If I look around this room, how many of you believe you are the best place in your community to get eye care? And, I'll get a couple hands go up. And they don't go up like, they don't shoot up, right? They're kind of like this. They're a little bit afraid to admit it. And I often, as I'm talking about it, and then I'll say, do you know, if I was in a room of cataract surgeons, the worst cataract surgeon in your community, if I ask that question, their hands are going to shoot up. And I think there's a lot of things that are endearing about our profession that actually make it so that we're a little bit timid to put that out there. It doesn't mean that you are that, like, if you believe you're the best and you put that out there, like, if you're going to be awesome, you have to live up to that. If that is something that you're really going to hold yourself to, you have to live up to it. And so in a lot of ways, it's not an arrogant statement. I think it can come off that way. I think it can come off like, I'm not going to raise my hand really high because I don't want everybody to think I'm a weirdo or arrogant. But if you really believe that means you have to put your money where your mouth is. So you're going to have to,
right.
You're going to, even if you're, so like, what that entails is if I don't do dry eye in my practice, but when you come into my practice, I'm the best place for you if you have dry eye, because I'm going to figure out if I can't fix it, somebody else is going to fix it, right? And so that's it.
Exactly.
It's just a different mentality, and I think that's where people struggle is they haven't identified whatever it is. It may not be being awesome, right? But whatever that thing is, then it makes you kind of float in the wind, right? Because if you're going to be awesome and somebody comes in with a problem, it's very easy to figure out, like, I've got to be awesome. I got to make this problem go away for this patient, right?
Right.
And But if it's like, I don't know, we don't really have a clear identity as a practice, so I'm not really sure how to handle this. How would Dr. Pinkston think if I do this? And man, that's going to cost $250 because I'm going to have to give him a refund. So, were you awesome? Right?
Yeah.
Then you were awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, done. And you never have to worry about that stuff.
Right. And I think you're right. I think optometrists in general, we don't want to be seen as cocky or arrogant. And sometimes, like, I'm sure I get kind of called that one a little bit when I speak because I get very passionate about it, and I think it's very important. I think the disclaimer in anything like that is like, I'm not trying to be awesome at your expense. Like, so if you and I are, even if we have vision source practices in the same town, it's not that I want my practice to be better at the expense of your practice.
Correct.
That's not all I'm saying.
Correct.
I'm saying is I want my practice to be the best practice that I can possibly build for my practice, which might look different than your practice. Like I might not do IPLs or sclerals or whatnot. If I get my hands in it, we're going to go completely into deep into the pool. Like, we're jumping in all in and we're going to figure it out. But until then, if we're across town, like, hey, Chris does a lot better job with that. He is awesome at that, and you're going to be in much better hands. And that's kind of knowing what you're good at, in my opinion. Like, right, like figuring out, okay, we're really good at this. We're really good at this avenue of eye care. We're going to be the best, and frankly, we're probably going to beat our competitors at it. But that doesn't mean that takes anything away from our competitors either. They're going to be better at other things, and I think that's okay. Like, that's perfectly fine. Like, we all have colleagues that like are better at certain things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I wish them the best of success, and I want to refer that. I want to have a practice that I can build, that I can have referrals for. If you're doing IPLs and I don't do that, cool. There you go. Here it is. I'll send them all to you. Like, take care of the patient like I would, and we can have a good thing going here. And so I think that's really important, that it doesn't mean that it comes at anybody's spells. Just like your F3 thing. Like, if we're doing push-ups out there or burpees or whatever, it's not that I'm trying to beat you. I'm trying to push my limit. And then if I happen to finish first, or you happen to finish first, so be it. We kind of come together at the end and we circle up, and it's still, we're all kind of part of this collective community.
Yeah, man, I think that's it, and I think it has to be built on trust, right? Like, you made the point of not caring about the guy across the street, or across your town that's a Vision Source doctor or not, right? I mean, frankly, I think I do really believe that a rising tide rises all ships, and so it doesn't, or elevates all ships. It doesn't have to come at the expense of someplace else. I think where it does rub people wrong is if they don't believe that the other person has their best interest at heart. That's where I think it becomes a challenge, and that's where I think Vision Source and F3, if we're going to cycle back to that point, it eliminates the curiosity about whether or not somebody has your best interest at heart. Right? When they give you advice or they ask advice, you have been through enough hard things with them to know that they're going to give you genuine advice, and they're going to ask for it when they need it. I think that's really important.
Right. Yeah. And being vulnerable, right? Like, being vulnerable too. Like, listen, I'm if somebody calls you up and they think you have a great practice, and you're like, listen, that's not my thing. Like, I think even that, like, sometimes we can put people on pedestals. Like, okay, that guy, he's got it all figured out, right? And you call him up, you ask advice, like, man, I have no idea what to do there. Like, you're in a tough spot. And then to some degree, I wish I had answers sometimes, but whether it's personally or professionally, I'm like, okay, not everybody has it figured out, and that's okay. Like, there's this mystique of that everything's perfect, and that's just not the case, professionally and personally,
Yeah, Ted McElroy does a really good job about articulating this stuff, and I've learned a lot from him. As I've aged, I've kind of I want more input from outside. I want more. When there was a while that you could say, well, he's just a hot shot. I know everything. And then once you realize, like, at some point you flip and you don't know everything anymore, and then you acknowledge you don't know everything, and that's where it becomes really fun. And I don't know when that was. It's been quite a few years now. But having other people come in and say, hey, what do you think about my practice? And what do you think about how should we do things? And making them experts to your team has been a lot of fun and super rewarding, and just an area of growth that I never, you at some point in your life you think you've got everything figured out, and then until you realize you don't, and it's just so much more fun that way.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like I said, that's why kind of what you were saying, like, what's your purpose? Like, I think that's the pushing yourself in your practice, your family, just yourself to be better. Like, I think that's all what we're all trying to do. I think everybody's trying to do that in their own different way until you figure out what that looks like and how you articulate that. I think that's the key part, is figuring out what where you're at and where you're at on that journey,
Dr. Pinkston, that's a great way to finish this. Although, because we were talking about F3, I think we should finish this like we would normally finish an F3 workout. So I'll let you go.
All right. Jordy, 36, Tommy Pinkston.
Christopher Wolfe, 40, cataracts.